Huge explosions rocking Beirut as Israel and the U.S. military continue to ferociously pound terror targets across the Middle East, escalating their strikes on Iranian air defenses and missile sites. President Trump posting on Truth Social, there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. And Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt outlining what that means.
When he, as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury has been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender, whether they say it themselves or not.
The president telling NBC News that a potential U.S. ground invasion of Iran isn't needed because, quote, it's a waste of time. They've lost everything. They've lost their Navy. They've lost everything they can lose. Meanwhile, the Democratic resistance to Epic Fury is just getting started. The country is split evenly on how they feel about the strikes, but AOC doesn't see it that way.
The vast majority of Americans are against a war with Iran. Two things can be true at the same time. We can acknowledge the brutal reality of the Iranian regime and their murdering of protesters and targeting of people, and we can also know for sure that a forever war will not resolve that issue.
And Kamala Harris taking a moment at Jesse Jackson's funeral earlier today to hit President Trump.
So let me just say, I predicted a lot about what's happening right now. I'm not into saying I told you so, but we did see it coming. But what I did not predict is that we would not have Jesse Jackson with us right now to help us get through this.
And RIP to Mr. Jackson. All right, Jesse, a number of these Democrats just weeks ago were saying, Taco, the president told these protesters he was going to help and he never did anything. But now they're angry that he's done something.
Yeah, I don't even care about these people anymore. Kamala Harris is a joke. She couldn't find the Strait of Hormuz on a map. And AOC totally discredited herself when she was in Europe the other day. They asked her about Taiwan and she froze. So forget about those people. They're not serious. The Democrat argument against the war is three things. It's illegal, not true. It's going badly, definitely not true, and it's unnecessary. And if you look at the last week, we've proved that it was necessary because every time they send a missile or a drone our way or our allies' way, we have to intercept it with a THAAD, a Patriot, a Hornet, or a laser. That costs blood and treasure. If we had waited for the threat to be imminent, 5 years, 3 years, maybe in Gavin Newsom's next presidential term, the Iranians would build up such a massive stockpile of drones and missiles, it would have created a shield around their nuclear program, and any operation like this would have been unthinkably bloody and catastrophic and may not have worked. And it may have prevented, let's just go with the argument, President Gavin Newsom from even doing this. And then on his watch, we would have had a nuclear Iran who would have been able to blackmail the entire world. I didn't even know this, but 1/3 of the world's population is within range of Iranian missiles. If we had waited, it would have been more. I'm talking from Paris to Calcutta. We did the entire world a favor. This war was the last realistic opportunity to take this regime out, and it's going incredibly well. The drone carrier was just taken out. We have growlers jamming their electronics. We actually have attack helicopters flying over the capital of the country. Think about that. 6 days ago, we were firing missiles from the Mediterranean, and now we have manned attack helicopters right across their capital, leveling their command and control posts, and they can't do a thing about it because they're blind. The pace of U.S. operations is doubling over the last 48 hours, and the pace of the Iranian offensive effectiveness has just dropped. It's plummeting. The Israelis, they just lowered their threat level. They can come out of their bunkers now. Flights are coming out of Tel Aviv now. Their strategy is to cower and wait until we don't have the stomach for this and to inflict enough pain on our Arab allies hit an oil refinery or a tanker, so it raises the cost of the war. Pete Hegseth said it best. We have the will and the commitment and the munitions to see this thing through. And the President of the United States does not seem bothered by the timeline. Right now, you're already seeing desertions among the police, the IRGC, and among regime elements. If that continues to go and you see this ethnic fracturing around the perimeter of the country, remember, it's mostly Persian, but you got Kurds, you got Arabs, you got Baluchis, you got a lot of different sects. If they start to fracture and you get an armed outside group come in and draw this, whatever's left over of this regime out, it opens them up to airstrikes. I think the rest of the country needs to look at this. We are 6 days in. This is going very well. And I think the United States military is the best in the world.
Okay, I bet the panel would probably agree on that last part, if not a lot of other things that you said. Now, Kayleigh, I did notice that you were wincing every time we said governor. Gavin Newsom as President Newsom.
Yeah.
You were a little faint there. You know how important that.
Fell over.
Try to make a point.
Yep.
You know how important messaging is, especially in a moment like this. And that's what some of the critics are saying. Listen, the president has spoken about this. He's been very accessible the last few days, as he always is. But does he need to sort of land the plane on messaging here? Because he's got trouble on the far right, too. A lot of the MAGA base who were worried about this.
I think the effectiveness of this operation is landing the plane. I think the single most effective communication we've seen was the CENTCOM briefing yesterday. That was extraordinary. They should do those often. But as Jesse was talking, I was just looking up some facts and ensuring I was correct on them, and indeed I was. You had President Trump, when he left office, and this is something I'm going to talk to Vice President Mike Pence about tomorrow, a status quo in the Middle East that was rapidly going in a positive direction. You had Middle East peace accords, the first time in 25 years. I was sitting there on the South Lawn when Bahrain and the UAE said, we are going to normalize relations with Israel. 2 other countries came on board. I was told by people in the administration, if they would have been given a little more time, Saudi Arabia would have normalized relations. Not only that, I was looking this up and confirming the last 11 months of the Trump presidency, you had not a single U.S. service member pass away in Iraq during active duty. That's an extraordinary accomplishment, and it didn't come just on its own. It came because President Trump got on the phone with the leader of the Taliban and said, if you harm the hair on the head of an American service member, you will have hell to pay. And it paid dividends. And then you had Biden come in, and you had Abbey Gate, and you had all of these U.S. service members die at the Abbey Gate, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. You had immediate resuming of talks with Iran. The posture changed, and Iran grew, and October 7th happened. This was the time to strike. If not now, when? Allow these maniacs to get nuclear weapons? I mean, just today, you want another data point as to how crazy these religious fanatics were? Look at Trey Ying's reporting that Khamenei chose not to go down into the bunker last Saturday because he was confident that nobody would have the guts to strike him. Well, maybe you remember Biden. You don't remember President Trump because he struck you and the Ayatollah was killed immediately. Imagine if this wouldn't have happened. Imagine, God forbid, there's a Gavin Newsom presidency and the damage that would be done to U.S. service members abroad. You sometimes need to show your strength. President Trump has done that. Iran will never have nuclear weapons, and that will be the legacy of President Trump.
Well, Jessica, to the points that both of them have made so far, Jesse and Kayleigh, this issue about imminence and the fact that proxies were, fully funded, carrying out all kinds of terrible attacks, those kinds of things. We know that there were active assassination attempts that Iran hoped to carry out on President Trump. Where for you does the line come when it's imminent, not imminent?
Well, the right would have you believe that it's been an imminent threat for 47 years, even though we were sending birthday cakes all around. And Jesse says in 5 or 10 years, it could have gotten really bad. That would have given us a little more time to think this through. And you guys basically listening to you should just wave that mission accomplished banner and go back to that kind of era, because you're talking as if that this is a done deal, that we are so overwhelming them that nothing can go wrong, when the facts on the ground are that things are going wrong. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Reuters, NBC confirming that it was U.S. airstrikes that were responsible for hitting that Iranian school. Over 150 people dead, dozens of children. You talk about our new allies in the region, and I have given President Trump his flowers multiple times about the Abraham Accords, but the FT reporting that our partners like the Saudis, the Emiratis, Kuwaitis, Qataris are talking about withdrawing from contracts with us and suspending their investments. Oil prices surging. You love to talk about gas prices, up to $86 a barrel. The Qataris say we could get you to $150 a barrel, gas up 35 cents in a lot of conservative states. So that's not good for the midterms. And the Trump administration didn't refill the strategic petroleum reserves. You can say, oh, Biden depleted it. You still had over a year to fill it up. And you shouldn't go to war in the Middle East when you don't have enough oil. And now that Russia is providing the Iranians with information on where to strike American forces, so we didn't give the Ukrainians the Tomahawk missiles they asked for to take out the drone factories, the $20,000 drones that we spend $4 million on a missile per to take out. And now the Russians are helping the Iranians, and Bloomberg's reporting that we're going to ease sanctions, oil sanctions on the Kremlin.
Are you saying this operation's not going well?
I am saying that it is not.
Is that what you're saying, Jessica?
I am saying that there are problems with this operation.
No, tell the American people right now, is the American operation against the Iranian regime going well? Tell them.
I don't know how.
You don't know that this is an effective.
I don't know how you could listen to me say that we struck an Iranian school and that there are a bunch of dead kids and just say this is going great.
Jessica, he murdered 35,000 people. If someone made a mistake when they hit a school, that's bad, but that's war.
But you don't mention it. You just say
operation is not going well. Don't lie about the war. Do not lie about the war, Jessica. You're lying.
I'm prepared to come out and say
you know the war is going well.
I'm willing to say that this is a done deal.
He's ready to wave the banner.
I'm excited about this.
Out?
I will get my banner out, put my beard on the line. I think by summertime, it's going to be an amazing time to be an American. It's going to be an amazing time to be all over the world because the sheriff is back. Listen, one of the things you guys argue a lot about is one of the biggest things was, you know how it's going well? Because they brought up gas prices. That was the thing. Or, we might be out of bombs. Those are the talking points. But here's the thing. When I'm anti-war also until my countrymen are sent out to war, then I'm all for it, full regalia. Our troops are out there doing the thing. So you know what? High gas prices, no big deal. Food prices, no tech, all these things. Because you know what? In World War II, our American people who stayed home sacrificed everything to support our troops. So if the gas prices go up, and it's nice because we know why they went up now. Before, when prices went up, we'd be like, hey, Biden, why is this happening? Oh, Trump did it. President said, yeah, you're going to feel a pinch because this is what happens when you support the great American men and women who are just, if this was a boxing match, they would have stopped it. The president does not, I think Greg said this yesterday, I'm 1,000% behind him. He does not go into deals he does not know how to get out of. This is a completely different situation, and you keep bringing up things from the past. We've never seen a response from the Middle East like we have now. We're seeing Iran is done. They are done. And the longer it drags out, it's not going to be that long. The president wouldn't put us in this position. He's proved over and over and over again that he's an anti-war president. And your talking points, and just keeping it real, every time somebody quotes media as a source, I and most of the American people laugh. You guys have no credibility. So whatever polls you want, the only poll that I'm seeing right now is there's no flags poll flying in Iran right now. So good on USA. Keep doing your thing, making the world a better place.
And Kayla, you got a note.
Yes, just wanted to say quickly that I intended to say no active U.S. service member deaths in Afghanistan during the last the months of Trump's presidency. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.